Welcome to part 3 of my behind the scenes video on how I made my World War I trench warfare ambience. In this video, I'll be combining the visual elements from part 1 with the individual sound design from part 2 and then bringing it all together to show you how I made the final video for YouTube. Let's get into it. We're in Logic right now, and what you're looking at is the final completed project. We've got the video here and we've got the Logic timeline here. And I'm just going to play you a quick preview just before we get started. So that was a quick preview of the completed project, and today I'm just going to run through the entire project, run through all the tracks and show you what went into this and how I incorporated the sounds that I made in part 2. So this project has a total of 181 tracks, and I've divided them into subfolders, and I'll just open these folders up to show you the actual size of the project because it is pretty big. And there you have it. So this project is huge. You can see all the individual sound elements. The way I usually lay out my ambience is I start off with the environment. So I'll solo that for you, and as you can see I've got lots of subsections here, and I'll be going through each and every single one of them to show you how this ambience came about. So for the first section we'll start with the environment. Solo that. And everything in orange is essentially the environment and the environmental sounds. Okay, so as I go along, if you pay attention to the video and the audio at the same time and just go between them, you'll get an idea of what's going on. Starting off, I've got the environment soloed, and since there's fire in here, I've decided to put some fire samples in here. So I've got multiple fire samples. I've got one for this one, one for this one, one for this one, and they're just in different spots. So I'll play them for you. So that's the lower left fire. Then I've got the upper right. And then I've got another one. And together. So these fire samples run throughout the ambience, and they're just like a bed, just underneath everything. What else? Next up, I've got the rain and thunder. I'll just play that for you. So as you can see, it's raining in the video. So I've put the rain and thunder in small sections of the video just to add variety. That's the fire, the rain, thunder, and I've also got wind. I'll play that for you. And the wind is very subtle. It's there. You probably can't hear it amongst everything else, but it's just there underneath everything, and I'll play it for you. Very subtle, but it's there. And that essentially makes up the environment, and it's a great starting point. It's how I normally start my ambiences, with the environment, the weather, and I'll play this all together. That's the environment done. Next up, I've got the biplane samples. So I've placed these in different spots throughout the audio, throughout the soundscape, and they're coming in different directions. So you've got some biplanes coming from your left, going over to your right, some coming from your right, going to your left, some coming from behind, and just all across the soundscape. I think that's what adds depth. You want to use up the entire soundscape. I'll play you some samples of that. One of them. So you can just hear them moving across the soundstage. So this one is going across. Got another one here. That was the biplane sounds. Next up, I've got some Foley sounds that I've incorporated into the ambience. And these consist of soldiers running, dogs, wood planks, sandbag drops, and hammer hits. Now, you probably won't notice them amongst the artillery and all the explosions, but they are there, and if you listen carefully, you'll spot them. I'll just play you a preview of them all together. Soldiers running. Dog running across the field. More soldiers running. Hammer hits. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I've also got some water pump sounds, which are here somewhere. Where the water pump sounds gone? Where are you, water pump? Oh, there you are. So I've put these in very few. I've only placed a few of these in there, but they're in there. If you can spot them, well done. So water pump, as you know, the trenches were filled up with water. They got flooded often, so the soldiers had to pump the water out of the trenches. And yeah, so those are the Foley sounds. I think I've covered all the Foley sounds. After that, I've got some samples of men shouting in the trenches when they're going over the top. I'll play that for you right now. That's that. And I've got a trench whistle as well. The dreaded sound of the trench whistle. When you heard this, you had to go over the top. Crazy. So that is pretty much all the Foley sounds. And now we can get to the good stuff, the artillery. I've muted the sounds that I've just shown you. And now we'll get into the artillery, which is this entire section. And I'll just go through them one by one. The first group is the bullet tracers or the bullet whizzes. In part one, I showed you how I made the bullet tracers and how I incorporated that into the video. These sounds are basically matching those bullet tracers, and I'll quickly give you a preview of that. If you watch the video and then watch this, you'll see how they sync up. And I've done this manually, one by one. I mean, it took hours, but it was worth it in the end. You get the idea. So those are the bullet tracers, and I've added them throughout the video. There's no loops in this, everything is different. If I just go across, these are all the bullet tracers in yellow, and they go throughout the ambience. Next up is the distant handguns. So these handguns are the Bayard 1908 that I showed you in part 2, and the Webley handgun. I'll just play you the distant handguns. So they sound different from what I showed you in part 2, because what I've done is I've EQ'd them and I've taken the high frequencies out, and then I've lowered the volume and mixed it in, essentially pushing it back into the soundscape to give the illusion of distant gunfire. And that is the distant handgun section. And I've got this going throughout the ambience as well. Next up, I have the rifles, one of my favorite sections. And if I open this subgroup up, you'll see a bunch of different rifles. Well, it's essentially 2 rifles. You've got the German G98 and then you've got the Lee Enfield. So the way I've done this is I've placed the German rifles on the left. As you can see here, I'll just click on this. So this is the sound stage. It's like a 3D soundscape of the audio. And I've placed the British rifles on the right here. So basically you have the British rifles firing and then you have the return fire. So they're just going across the field and just more depth really. And I'll just play you a quick preview so you get the idea. So these are just the rifles. So that really creates depth by placing them in different spots to the left and to the right, behind you, in front of you, and so on. And that is the rifles. Next up, I've got distant MG08. So this is the German machine gun, and I've placed them in the distance, slightly lower volume, and I'll play that for you. So it's much lower in audio, in volume. This one's really far back. Another one here. So these are really lowered in volume and pushed right back in the soundscape. Okay, so that is the MG08. Next up is the Lewis gun. So I'll open that up for you. So the Lewis gun comes in later in the ambience. And I'll play that for you now. These are close, right in front of you, like in your face sounds you'll hear. Love it, sounds amazing. Okay, so that was the Lewis gun. And next up, I've got the close machine guns. These are the MG08s and the Vickers gun. I thought I didn't use them, but I obviously have, so yeah, my bad. Anyway, so I'll play this for you. So once again, you've got the German guns on the left and you've got the British Vickers guns on the right, and it's just fire, return fire, and back and forth. And that's that. Next up, I've got the flashing guns. So what I mean by flashing is I've synced these up with the visuals that I showed you in part 1 with the muzzle flashes. And if I play these, you'll see what I mean. If you just watch the visuals here, and then you'll see these yellow ones match up. Right there, and again there. And they just match up perfectly. I've done these manually, it took me forever, but it's all good. See them? There again. There. There. And yeah, so those are the flashing machine guns, Lewis guns to be precise. Got the anti-tank rifle. Love this gun. Give you a preview of that. And that's to the left on the German side. And after that, I've got okay, so those are the rifles and machine guns done. So next up is the explosions. So we're talking bombs, grenades, cannons, and these are the middle distant explosions. Got a bunch of these everywhere, and I'll just play some of them for you. Some here. So those are the middle distant explosions. I've got a huge variety of them across the soundscape. And that's that. Next up, I have distant explosions. So these are more far back, pushed back in the soundscape. So really thick and deep, loud explosions in the distance. Crazy. Okay, so those were the distant explosions. Next up, I've got the huge explosions. And these are just deafening. I mean, I'd advise you to turn your volume down. I haven't put too much of these in there, but I have put them in certain spots. And I'll play you a preview. Damn, it's loud. Another one. And I've put a riser before that, so I'm not sure if I showed you how I sound designed this, but it's there just before the explosion. And then, yeah, so that's the riser, and then you've got the bomb, and together. Really huge explosions. That's that. Next up, we've got small hand mortars. Play your preview of that. So I've got different varieties of these. and they also run through the ambience. Next up, grenades. Those are the grenades, and next we have the British bombs. Bombs, you want to call it bombs? Cannons, shells, mortars. Yeah, so these are generic mortars, bombs, explosions that I've made. So a nice variety of British bombs. Next up, German cannons. These are huge as well. Play that for you. And finally, the flamethrower. I've only put these in specific parts of the ambience. Didn't want to overdo it. So they come and go in certain spots, probably about 3 times. And I'll play that for you. So that is a flamethrower. I forgot to mention that I've put some cough samples in there, as well as some screams of pain and agony from soldiers and whatnot. I think it's a nice addition to the flamethrower and really makes it real and horrifying. And oh yes, also I don't think I've shown you this when I sound designed the flamethrower in my previous video, but I'm not sure. Actually, no, it's not in here. So what I've done with the flamethrowers, I've actually panned it across the field. So if you listen closely, you'll hear the flamethrower moving across the soundstage. So you hear it moving across the soundstage. So as you can imagine, when they fired the flamethrowers, they sprayed up the whole place, you know, left to right, and just burnt up everything. And that's what I wanted to recreate, and I think it sounds alright. And that is pretty much it. So all together, we have the World War I trench warfare ambience finished. And I'll play you the most intense section of my ambience, which is my favorite bit, at around the 20-minute mark. Enjoy. Absolute mayhem. And that's about it really. So thanks for watching. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, drop a comment, hit me up, and I'll see you in the next video.